So at the start of Module 2, we look at Area 2 of the GreenComp framework. And Area 2 is all about how we think about things. Climate change, the biodiversity problem, sustainability in general is a complex problem, and it's easy to get lost in details. So it's important to take a step back and look at the frame. So with the science in the previous chapter, once the key boundaries are understood, once the key limits are appreciated, then the details become more meaningful. But of course, these problems are not just problems of science. And this is what the GreenComp framework defines in this Area 2 as a wicked problem. Because if it was just science and if we were just rational creatures, we would have fixed the problem by now. But of course, we haven't, and it's ongoing. And in fact, as you've seen in the previous module, emissions and biodiversity loss have only ever increased. And this, therefore, implies, or it involves, lots of questions of psychology, sociology, economics, politics, culture, art, and so on. And so to get a handle on these complexities, we also need a clear frame. We need a clear vantage point. And we need to be able to do more than just problem solving. We have to do something called problem framing. In other words, we need to do some systems thinking. So schools and education, as was established in the first module and with the reading for this module, they are very good at doing atomized and specialization. But what they're not so good at is taking a step back and asking the wider questions, the big holistic questions. And it is a difficult thing to do. It's hard to see the framework that you're operating inside just because our noses are in a way so close to the ground. We have teachers, we all have a subject specialism. And with the climate crisis and with sustainability, we all have a perspective which is informed by our local conditions or our local culture and so on. So doing systems thinking is a really big challenge. And just to illustrate that, we could think about language, because as a 2-year-old, as a 3-year-old, you grow up and you are thrown into a language. If you're born in Japan, you're likely going to speak Japanese. If you're born into France, you're likely going to speak French, etc. Now, when a child is learning a language inside a family and inside a social community, you don't teach a 4-year-old grammar. They just speak it. It's a game, and they join in the game. And if you were to, in fact, try and sit down with a 3 or 4-year-old and explain the grammar, to explain the rules of what they're doing when they speak, when they answer questions, when they use and play with words, they won't be able to explain what they're doing, because they've learnt it as a game and they play it as a game. And yet, behind any speech, any sentence that a child makes, they have picked up the rules of the game. So it's the same with the climate crisis and with the sustainability crisis. There's like a grammar at work in how we think and how we approach the subject and the problem, which is very difficult to actually look at in itself. And to bring that to the surface, to bring, in a way, the operating system into view, takes quite a little bit of work. So we could say, in one sense, what we're doing at the moment in environmental education is that we're providing the students with vocabulary, if you like, things at the surface level. Now, even at that level, I think there are key words which we're not using, like tipping points or limits or planetary boundaries. So there are some key vocabulary, there are some key concepts which are missing from our educational system. But at the same time, we have to go further than vocabulary. We have to do that harder work of getting them to see what the grammar of the situation is. What are like the hidden rules that all of those words operate in? What is the underlying framework that we're approaching the whole crisis with? And if you can give students that systems view, you can bring that to the surface, it makes them really powerful, because then they can start to question that grammar, and they can start to question some of the assumptions which we carry with us from our local situation or from a community or various biases. If you can bring those to the surface, we can then start to evaluate them and ask questions like, if they're good rules, should we be having this as a priority? Should these things always just be taken as a given? But of course, it's harder to learn grammar than it is to learn vocabulary. So this is, in a way, a bigger test for environmental education.